The sizzle of burgers on my grill mixed with the shrieks of laughter as Emily chased her two kids through the sprinklers. The sun bore down mercilessly, but no one cared. After months of endless work hours and juggling Dad's recovery, this weekend felt like a gift. Dad, Judge Richard Miller to most, sat on the patio, a pitcher of lemonade at his side, his cane resting against the chair. The heart surgery had slowed him down, but his mind remained razor sharp. "Smells like summer," he said, raising his glass. "Damn right," I replied, flipping a burger. Emily plopped down next to Dad. "Feels like old times, huh?" she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Could use a little more shade," Dad quipped. The kids giggled, darting back into the spray of the sprinkler. For the first time in months, I let myself relax. And then, "Excuse me, but who authorized this gathering?" The voice cut the air like shattered glass. I turned, spatula in hand. A woman, late 50s, stood rigidly at the edge of my yard. Perfect blonde helmet of hair, oversized sunglasses, floral blouse buttoned to her throat despite the heat wave, and of course, a clipboard gripped like a weapon. She marched onto my lawn as if it belonged to her. "Can I help you?" I asked cautiously. "You can," she replied, voice clipped. "Name?" "Jake Miller. I just moved in 2 months ago." "Evelyn Carter, HOA president." She stared at me like I'd just parked a monster truck on her rose garden. "You're in violation of Maple Grove's visitor policy." Emily stepped forward. "Violation? They're my kids, and we're just visiting." Evelyn's eyes raked over the scene. The grill, the kids, the parked cars. "Unregistered guests require clearance 72 hours in advance," she said. "It's clearly outlined in your homeowner covenant. Page 42, section 5.13. I blinked. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I assure you, Mr. Miller, I'm very serious." I laughed, but it sounded hollow. "They're my family." Evelyn's lips curled into a practiced smile. "Family, friends, it makes no difference. We have protocols." She scribbled furiously on her clipboard. "First warning, 3 warnings equal mandatory fines." Dad slowly stood, leaning on his cane. "Is this how you always greet your new neighbors, Miss Carter?" Evelyn stiffened. "Judge Miller, correct?" Dad nodded. "Even federal judges are subject to HOA regulations." Dad tilted his head, voice calm. "Miss Carter, please show me a single legal precedent where an HOA has the authority to limit private familial visits on personal property." Evelyn's grip on the clipboard tightened. "The rules apply to all residents equally. We expect compliance." Dad smiled thinly. "I'll make sure to highlight that in my notes." Her eyes twitched, but she forced another smile. "I'll overlook this, for today. But be aware, Mr. Miller, we take enforcement very seriously." She spun on her heel, heels clicking against my walkway. Before she disappeared, she called back without turning, "You'll be hearing from us very soon." Emily leaned in. "Is this normal?" "No," I said. "But I've got a feeling it's going to be." I glanced at Dad, who was already flipping through his mental law library. And deep down, I knew it. We just declared war. Before we dive headfirst into this wild HOA madness, do me a quick favor. Smash that like button and drop a comment below. Where in the world are you tuning in from? The morning air felt wrong even before I opened the door. The garish pink slip slapped against the door frame, flapping like some grotesque flag of war. "Notice of violation! Immediate attention required!" screamed across the top. I yanked it down, heart pounding. "Unregistered guests! Excessive noise disturbance! Unauthorized vehicle in driveway!" I scoffed aloud. Kids laughing in the sprinkler and Emily's minivan counted as violations now? As if on cue, Sam Yates shuffled past with his old beagle. "Morning, Sam," I called. He froze mid-step, eyes locking on the violation notice. "Already?" he whispered. "You've kicked the hornet's nest." "You mean Evelyn?" He nodded grimly. "She's intense. You might say unhinged. Once you're on her radar, it doesn't end." I stepped off my porch to meet him halfway. "What exactly am I dealing with here?" Sam glanced around like someone might be listening. "Last December, the Ramirez family hosted their in-laws. Within days, fines stacked up. HOA lost their trash collection schedule. Evelyn even sent letters accusing them of violating lawn care codes midwinter. They sold and moved out by February." I clenched the paper tighter. "Is this even legal?" Sam shrugged. HOA bylaws are a maze. Evelyn counts on people being too overwhelmed or scared to push back. I thought of Dad's old sedan, disability tag swaying on the mirror. Not this time. Sam smirked faintly but walked off, shaking his head. Later that afternoon, the knock came sharp and fast. 2 HOA board members stood on my doorstep like IRS agents on audit day, Robert Keene and Diana Morales, matching navy polos, khakis, and that unnerving rehearsed HOA smile. "Routine inspection," Robert said without introducing himself. "For what?" Diana already had her phone out, snapping pictures of my lawn, the driveway, the wheelchair ramp. "You didn't notify us of guests," Robert replied calmly, scribbling notes. "We take safety and code compliance seriously." I stepped onto the porch. "This is harassment." Diana kept taking photos. "Non-standard hose placement, overgrown patch near the fence," she muttered. Robert pointed at the ramp Dad used. "This structure lacks HOA pre-approval. Section 8.1 of the Architectural Guidelines, Mr. Miller. Any modifications to property exteriors require board consent." "It's a medical ramp." Robert shrugged, handing me another slip. "Expect a notice. Compliance within 14 days or formal action follows." "You're threatening to fine me for keeping my disabled father safe," Diana smirked. "The rules apply equally to all residents." They walked away like they'd just delivered a pizza. That evening, while Dad dozed on the couch, I sat on the porch with a beer staring into the dark. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message burned into my screen. "Your family won't be welcome again." I stood, scanning the street. Across the road, behind the shadowed curtains of Evelyn's house, I spotted her silhouette, watching. Her blinds twitched shut. I crushed the empty can in my hand. "You're playing with the wrong family." It started 2 nights before the ambush. I was sitting on the porch with Dad, nursing beers under the dim porch light. "You feel that?" Dad asked, eyes narrowed at the street. "The silence?" He nodded. Maple Grove was unusually quiet. No footsteps on the sidewalks, no kids on bikes, not even Sam's usual after-dinner walk. Every curtain on the block was drawn tight, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Then we spotted it. A black sedan, creeping slowly past my house, headlights off. Dad leaned in, whispering, "Friends of Evelyn's?" I clenched my jaw. "Or hired help." The sedan lingered at the corner, then disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, a plain white envelope was taped to my front door. No HOA letterhead, just 3 words scrawled in red marker. "Stand down now." Inside, a sickening surprise. Photos, grainy surveillance shots. Kate holding her newborn on my porch. Dad reading the newspaper in the living room. Even me sleeping on the couch, taken through my half-closed blinds. My stomach turned. Dad took one look at the pictures and went pale. "They've crossed into criminal territory," he said. "This isn't HOA protocol. This is intimidation." I scanned the neighborhood. Evelyn's house loomed across the street, curtains closed like always. That afternoon, I found Robert watering his front lawn, fake smile plastered to his face. I stormed across the street. "You spying on us now?" I demanded. Robert glanced up lazily. "Routine documentation," he said. "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "You crossed a line," Robert smirked. "You really think you're untouchable, Miller? Evelyn built this neighborhood. You're the virus." Neighbors peeked out from behind blinds. "This isn't HOA work," I growled. "This is stalking." Robert shrugged. "Call it whatever you want. We're protecting Maple Grove from troublemakers like you." I stepped closer, voice low. "You ever point a camera at my family again? We'll see how county investigators feel about that." Robert's smirk faltered, but just for a second. "You won't live here long enough to file complaints," he hissed. That night, my phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "You don't know who you're messing with." Dad sat across from me in the dark living room. "They're spiraling," I said. Dad leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "I've seen it before," he said. "Bullies drunk on power. They don't stop until someone pushes harder." I nodded, fists clenched. Then Dad added quietly, "Or until they burn the whole place down." Thunder rumbled outside as we stared at the storm. I knew then, this wasn't about HOA fines anymore. This was personal, and it was about to explode. It was barely 5 a.m. when my phone exploded with Emily's frantic voice. Jake! It's Kate! Her water broke! 6 weeks early! She's bleeding! We need you now! I was out of bed in seconds. The cold morning air cut through me as I dashed to Kate's room. She clutched her stomach, pale and shaking. Tom scrambled behind her, tossing clothes into a hospital bag. "We'll make it, Kate," I promised, even though my heart thundered in my chest. Moments later, I helped her into the back seat of my SUV. Tom buckled in beside her, eyes wide with panic. 15 minutes to County General, I said, starting the engine. I threw it into reverse and slammed on the brakes. Blocking my driveway was Evelyn's black SUV, positioned like a barricade. Evelyn stood in front of it, arms folded, clipboard in hand. Beside her, Robert, Diana, and 2 other HOA members I'd never seen, one holding a 2-way radio, the other snapping photos like paparazzi. My blood froze. "What the—" I rolled down my window and laid on the horn. "Move! This is a medical emergency!" Evelyn took a slow, calculated step forward. Emergency or not, no unregistered guests are permitted to enter or leave Maple Grove. Kate cried out in pain behind me. "She's in labor!" I shouted. Robert calmly raised his phone, recording. "For the record," he muttered. Kate groaned louder. Blood spread across her sweatpants. Tom bolted from the car. "You're blocking an emergency! Move your damn car!" Evelyn didn't flinch. "Guests in violation of sections 9.4 and 10.2, she replied, voice eerily steady. "No prior notice filed. You ignored HOA directives." "Are you insane? This isn't about lawn care. She's going into premature labor." "Compliance maintains community order, Mr. Miller," Evelyn said, tilting her head. "Chaos spreads when we start making exceptions." I threw open my door, storming up to her. "If you don't move that SUV, I swear—" Evelyn interrupted, whispering so only I could hear. "Go ahead, make a scene. I'll report you for threatening a public official." Robert smirked behind her. Tom spun to the gathering neighbors. "Someone call 911. Mrs. Patel, barefoot and in her robe, sprinted across the street. "Evelyn, you've crossed the line." Evelyn turned on her. "Stay back, Mira. HOA regulations are clear. You're trespassing on a restricted enforcement scene." "Are you hearing yourself? This is lunacy." Diana held up a printout. "Per section 14.3, HOA board members have emergency authority to manage security concerns. Non-compliant guests are subject to immediate removal or restricted movement." Kate let out a blood-curdling scream from inside the car. "Jake!" Sirens sounded in the distance. I lunged at Evelyn. "You're endangering a life!" Evelyn didn't blink. "We'll need proof this is an actual emergency," she said. "A doctor's note, perhaps." Tom's fists balled at his sides. "What's wrong with you?" The ambulance tore onto the street, lights flashing. Paramedics leapt out but hesitated at the blocked driveway. "What is this?" one EMT yelled. "Private HOA business," Evelyn replied calmly. "They can walk around." I pushed past her. "Go around! Now!" The EMTs worked fast, carrying Kate past the blockade and into the ambulance. Tom followed. As they drove off, I turned to Evelyn, shaking with rage. "If that baby dies because of you—" She leaned in, voice icy. "You'll sue? Go ahead. You'll be buried in HOA bureaucracy. We've outlasted bigger threats than you." Neighbors gasped as Robert stepped forward. "The board met this morning. Your family is now barred from Maple Grove under emergency provisions." Mrs. Patel erupted. "You're crazy! That's illegal!" Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "Actually, it's legal enough until a judge says otherwise." "You can't exile someone's family," another neighbor called out. "We're protecting community integrity," Evelyn snapped. "Integrity?" I roared. "You just risked my sister's life." Evelyn turned, smirking. "This neighborhood is mine, Mr. Miller, always has been." I stood there, heart racing, as she finally unlocked her SUV. I didn't waste another second. Tires screeched as I sped past. In the rearview mirror, Evelyn stood in the middle of the street, smiling like the devil herself. The hospital lights flickered above me like a bad omen. Kate's labored breathing, the sharp beeping of monitors, the frantic whispers of doctors. It was chaos. Hours passed like minutes, but somehow, against every odd, Kate and her baby girl pulled through. As relief hit me, rage brewed just beneath the surface. I found Dad by the vending machines, hunched over but stone-faced. "We need to talk," I said, my voice hoarse. He nodded without looking up. "We will," he said gravely. At home. Dad sat at the kitchen table, spreading documents like he was prepping for trial. Jake, Evelyn Carter has crossed the line into criminal territory. No HOA has that kind of authority. I threw my jacket onto a chair. Yeah? Because to me, she's acting like she owns the police. Dad smirked without humor. She's bluffing. But bullies bluff best when no one calls them on it. He handed me a thick file marked Harper Law Group. Liz Harper, Dad said. Civil rights specialist, smart, aggressive. She owes me a few favors. I flipped through the first few pages. Case law, HOA codes, county zoning regulations. You're serious? Dad tapped a section with his finger. Maple Grove's HOA bylaws are riddled with problems. Illegal emergency powers, vague enforcement clauses, it's amateur hour. That night, I logged into Zoom. Liz Harper filled the screen. Sharp blazer, sharper glare. Mr. Miller, she greeted, I've reviewed the initial materials. Your HOA isn't just aggressive, it's operating outside county and possibly state law. Can we shut them down? That's the plan, Liz said. We'll hit them on every front, unlawful restraint, selective enforcement, and malicious interference. Especially what happened to your sister. That's textbook liability. Dad sat behind me, arms crossed. They blocked emergency medical transport, I added. Liz nodded. That's not just civil. It could be criminal negligence. I'll draft a TRO, temporary restraining order, and cease and desist. But you need to be ready for pushback. Dad leaned forward. We've handled worse. Liz arched an eyebrow. You haven't dealt with HOA fanatics, Judge. These people get cultish. The next morning, a courier dropped off a legal packet thicker than my fist. Inside, affidavits, preliminary motions, and letters addressed directly to the HOA board. Dad and I reviewed each document like soldiers reading a battle map. We'll file first thing, Dad said, eyes burning with resolve. But before we could breathe, another knock came. A folded HOA flyer slipped under the door. Mandatory notice, effective immediately. All guests to Maple Grove require background checks and formal ID badges. Failure to comply will result in immediate sanctions. I stared at the page, fists tightening. Dad read over my shoulder. They're escalating, he said quietly. They're going full Orwell, I replied. My phone buzzed. A blocked number. Back down or you'll be next. I showed it to Dad. He exhaled. Classic intimidation. They're scared. That makes them dangerous. I grabbed the packet from Liz off the table. We're filing tomorrow. Enough is enough. Dad's face hardened. They're gambling that no one will stand up to them. We will, and we'll drag them into the light. Outside, headlights flashed. Across the street, Evelyn stood under a lamppost, arms folded, staring directly at my window. I whispered to myself, You started this war, Evelyn. We're going to finish it. The nightmare didn't creep in. It stormed through the front gates of Maple Grove. By Monday morning, the neighborhood resembled a war zone, flyers taped to doors, mailboxes, and lampposts. Dangerous family threatens Maple Grove. Judge's son spreads chaos. Grainy, invasive photos of me, Dad, Kate, even a close-up of my newborn niece's terrified face during the ambulance standoff were plastered below the headlines. Some neighbors tore the flyers down, glancing nervously over their shoulders. Others left them, as if complying out of fear. As I walked the block, I could hear it. Whispers behind closed blinds. At the grocery store, a woman clutched her purse tighter as I passed. You're destroying this place, she snapped. A man stocking apples muttered under his breath. Lawyer's brat thinks he can break the rules. I gritted my teeth. Even at the hospital, nurses exchanged glances. That's the guy, one whispered. The HOA drama. I slammed the door when I got home. Dad sat at the table, leafing through legal documents. They're escalating, I hissed. Dad nodded slowly. They're terrified, son. That's why they're loud. I paced the room. Terrified? They've turned me into public enemy number one. Dad's voice was steel. Which means we're close to cracking them. A sharp knock. Sam Yates stood on the porch, eyes darting like a hunted man. Jake, can we talk inside? Once in, Sam's voice dropped. Evelyn's hosting off-the-record meetings. No minutes, no paper trail, only her inner circle is allowed. What's the pitch? I asked. That you're a plant, here to bankrupt the HOA, that you'll drag the entire community into a legal quagmire. Dad leaned in. She's building a false narrative. Sam hesitated. She also told people you threatened board members, said you vandalized your own driveway. I slammed the table. That's pure fiction. Sam's voice cracked. Jake, people believe her. Some are scared of losing everything. Good, I growled. Maybe they'll finally question who's leading them. Night fell. I stepped outside and froze. Outsider sprayed in blood red across the driveway. Seconds later, a brick crashed through the living room window. Glass exploded everywhere. The note tied to it read, "Last warning." Dad stood by my side, fists clenched. From across the street, Evelyn emerged from the shadows, Robert filming beside her. "You think this scares me?" I shouted. Evelyn lifted a megaphone. "You don't belong here, Mr. Miller!" Dad's voice boomed. "You've crossed a line, Carter!" Evelyn's laughter cut through the night. "You think the law's on your side? We control this town!" A handful of neighbors peered from behind blinds. No one spoke. "You'll lose everything!" Evelyn barked. "No one will buy a home in a community with a traitor like you!" I stepped forward. "You just threatened me on camera!" Robert's phone faltered slightly. Inside, Dad rubbed his temples. "They're unraveling!" My phone buzzed. Anonymous message. "She's next," attached. A blurred image of Kate outside the hospital cradling her newborn. I slammed my fists on the table. "No more warnings. We end this tomorrow." Dad's eyes narrowed. "No, we ruin them tomorrow." Another frantic knock. Mrs. Patel burst in, out of breath. "They're circulating petitions," she panted. "Emergency HOA meeting. They're pushing to evict you." "Eviction?" She nodded. "They're calling it a security measure under emergency provisions." Dad stood, stone-faced. "Over my dead body." Across the street, Evelyn's laughter echoed like a chilling victory cry. The Maple Grove Community Center was packed to the walls, buzzing with tension. Neighbors crowded together in uneasy silence as Dad and I pushed through the doorway. Whispers followed us like smoke. "They're here." "That's the judge's son," someone hissed. "Troublemakers," under their breath. At the front table, Evelyn sat like a queen, flanked by Robert and Diana, who glared at me like vultures. Evelyn's chin was high, her smile sharp and venomous. Her nails tapped a steady, predatory rhythm on the microphone. I scanned the room. Mrs. Patel caught my eye and gave me a small, nervous nod. Evelyn finally tapped the mic. "Order," she purred. "Tonight's meeting will address escalating disruptions and security concerns caused by Mr. Miller and his unregistered entourage." A ripple of gasps. I stood slowly. "You mean my family, or the ambulance you blocked?" Evelyn's smile twitched. "Mr. Miller, you are in clear violation of Maple Grove's covenant. This isn't up for debate." Dad stood beside me, calm but razor-sharp. "Not by a covenant twisted and weaponized. Your board is trampling civil rights." Robert leaned in, sneering. "Sir, no one here cares about courtroom theatrics." Dad's voice lowered to a growl. "You'll care when a judge is staring you down." Dad pulled out a thick folder and slammed it onto the table. "This is a formal motion for injunctive relief listing harassment, unlawful obstruction, and civil rights violations committed by this board." Gasps turned to mutters. Evelyn's eyes darted wildly as she grabbed the folder, rifling through. "This is libel," she barked. "No," Dad said flatly. "It's your reckoning." Diana stood abruptly. "You want chaos? No rules? Then Maple Grove becomes a slum overnight." I stepped closer. "No, it becomes a community again." Sam Yates stood in the back. "He's right," Sam called out. "We've had enough of living under fear." Evelyn slammed her palms on the table. "You think this neighborhood survived because of kindness?" she screamed. "I kept the weeds out. I kept the garbage out." Dad leaned in, voice cold. "You mean the families you bullied, fined, and drove out?" Evelyn's eyes flashed. "I protected this place." "No," I replied. "You caged it." The room stirred. Mrs. Patel whispered, "It's time." Evelyn glared at the crowd. "You're sheep, all of you. Without me, this will fall apart." Dad calmly closed the folder. "Then let it fall, because we'll rebuild it better." Scattered applause swelled into cheers. Evelyn's voice cracked. "You'll all regret this. I will sue every single one of you." "You already tried," I shot back. Robert, sweating, whispered, "Evelyn, stop." She ignored him. "You think anyone will protect you when this neighborhood crumbles?" Evelyn barked. "I know things about every single one of you." Mrs. Patel stood tall. "We're not afraid anymore," she said firmly. Evelyn's chair screeched as she stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. I said it's over." But no one budged. Evelyn's voice grew wild. "Do you hear me? I made this place. I own it." Dad, steady as ever, turned to me. "She just buried herself," he whispered. As Dad and I exited, Evelyn's voice sliced through the air. "This isn't over, Miller. I'll bury you." Outside, under the flickering lot light, Officer Dean Walker leaned casually against his cruiser. "Heard you shook the hive," Dean said. "They're cornered," Dad replied. Dean grinned. "Good, because county investigators will be here first thing tomorrow." Dad clapped me on the shoulder. "Son, Evelyn Carter's about to have the worst day of her life." Sunlight hadn't fully pierced the blinds when Sam's frantic pounding shook my front door. "Jake, get out here! They're here!" I yanked the door open, adrenaline already kicking in. Sam pointed wildly toward the HOA office across the cul-de-sac. 3 black county vehicles sat parked at crooked angles, their official seals glinting under the morning sun. Plainclothes inspectors swarmed, lugging file boxes and clipboards. Neighbors gathered on lawns and sidewalks, whispering like school kids during a fire drill. Across the street, Evelyn stood frozen. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked rattled. Robert flanked her, pale as a ghost, while Diana clung to a stack of HOA folders like a lifeline. Dad's car pulled up next to me. He got out, adjusted his tie like he was back in court. "Let's take a walk," he said, voice calm but taut. We crossed the street just as the inspectors entered the HOA building. Mrs. Patel appeared beside me. "Jake," she whispered, eyes wide, "is this your father's doing?" Dad simply smiled, but the fire in his eyes gave her the answer. Inside the office, chaos reigned. Inspectors rifled through cabinets, hauling out thick folders, crumpled receipts, and boxes labeled archives. I caught Evelyn's shrill voice. "This is an illegal invasion of private property." A woman in a gray suit stepped forward, flashing a laminated badge. "Per County Code 43.7, she announced loud enough for the crowd outside to hear, "we're performing a full audit of all HOA financials and operational records." The murmurs turned to full-blown gasps. Evelyn stormed toward her. "You can't do this! This is harassment!" The inspector remained unfazed, holding up a court order. "We have full judicial authorization." Robert stumbled back. But that's confidential." "Not anymore," the inspector replied. Evelyn spun toward the crowd. "This is a witch hunt. This man," she pointed at me, "is trying to destroy this community." Dad stepped forward. "Correction. We're holding you accountable for every illegal fine, every harassment campaign, and every stolen dollar." Neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Another inspector emerged from inside, holding a folder labeled Executive Minutes. "Found it," he said. Evelyn lunged for the folder, but the inspector stepped aside. "I'm warning you," Evelyn shrieked. "I will sue every single one of you." The lead inspector turned back to the crowd. "We'll be conducting private interviews with board members and affected residents," she announced. Mrs. Patel raised her hand. "I'd like to be first," she said firmly. Dad smirked. Back home, Dad handed me a sealed envelope. "This is it," he said quietly. "Your complaint triggered this." I opened it. An official notification confirming the county's investigation into Maple Grove HOA was underway. Across the street, neighbors gathered in hushed groups. Some stared at the HOA office, others glanced nervously at their homes. I stared out the window, heart pounding. Evelyn's house sat dark. But then, through a narrow gap in her blinds, I spotted her watching me. Her usual smirk was gone, replaced by something colder, something twisted. I mouthed the words, "It's over." But even as the words left my lips, my gut twisted. Evelyn Carter wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Every seat was filled. Neighbors lined the back wall, some whispering nervously, others glaring at the defense table. Evelyn sat stiff as a corpse, flanked by Robert and Diana, their legal team frantically whispering, flipping through papers like they were already drowning. I sat next to Dad and Liz Harper, who was calmly reviewing her notes, her demeanor the exact opposite of the chaos unfolding across the room. The door creaked. The judge entered, a no-nonsense woman with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Case 1428B, Miller versus Maple Grove HOA," the clerk announced. Liz rose smoothly. "Your Honor, We present evidence of civil rights violations, unlawful obstruction of emergency services, and financial misconduct. Evelyn's lawyer leapt to his feet. This is character assassination. The HOA acted fully within its rights. The judge arched a brow and flipped through the documents. Obstructing a medical emergency isn't a right, counselor, she said flatly. Liz handed over the exhibits. Photos, emails, bank statements, and HOA communications detailing funds funneled to personal accounts, unauthorized surveillance on private property, and repeated acts of intimidation. A wave rippled through the courtroom. Jurors leaned forward. Evelyn's face drained of color. Dad leaned over. "Watch her crumble," he whispered. Evelyn bolted upright. "This neighborhood is mine!" she snapped. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Sit down, Mrs. Carter!" But Evelyn wasn't done. "You think you can take this away from me?" she screamed. "I built Maple Grove. Without me, this place would be a slum." Robert tugged at her sleeve. "Evelyn, stop!" he hissed. Liz remained steady. "Your Honor," she continued, "we've uncovered forged signatures, hidden accounts, and inflated fees channeled through Mr. Keene's landscaping company." Gasps. Robert paled. It was standard procedure," Robert stammered. Liz turned to him. "Was it also standard to approve $200,000 in contracts without homeowner votes?" Evelyn snarled. "They're all sheep. They needed me to control them." Whispers filled the gallery. Mrs. Patel stood abruptly. "You terrorized us!" she yelled. Others joined in. "You fined my family for putting up holiday lights. You blocked an ambulance. You lied to us." The judge pounded the gavel again. "Order!" Evelyn whirled on the room. "Ungrateful cowards, I kept the trash out. I protected this neighborhood." Dad calmly rose. "By threatening families and stealing from your own community." The judge exhaled sharply. "Effective immediately," she declared. "Maple Grove HOA board activities are suspended. A court-appointed trustee will assume management. Restraining orders are granted to the Miller family." Cheers, applause. Evelyn seethed. "You think this is over?" she hissed at me as we passed. Dad didn't flinch. "You're lucky it's only civil court." I leaned in. "Remember blocking my driveway? This is justice." Evelyn's eyes burned as she was swallowed by the furious crowd. Outside, the sun was blinding. Dad smirked. "Let's see how she handles daylight."